Hello everybody and welcome to what has certainly been a very eventful Saturday afternoon / evening in the world of boxing. I'm Carlos Toro of Carlos Toro Media, and I'm here to talk about the chaos that has been the Alexander Povetkin and Dillian Whyte rematch that took place in Gibraltar. And really it was a card that was very eventful. But before we kind of get into the nitty-gritty of things, for those of you that are watching, hope you guys hit that subscribe button. If you haven't already, click the bell icon for notifications on when new videos coming out. Just yesterday, I put out the Jaron and Sergey Lipinets press conference to kick off their April 10 Showtime main event. I got to talk to Jaron Ennis, got to talk to Sergey Lipinets, even got to talk to Stephen Espinosa, so you can check out those videos in the channel. Also got to speak recently with Michel Rivera, the PBC lightweight contender, a really good contender for PBC at 135 pounds. Got to also talk to Roman Chocolatito Gonzalez, Eric El Terrible Morales, and it's been a busy month for this channel, but I hope that it pays off in the end. I hope you guys like the content, and hopefully I get to do more of these post-fight reactions, recaps, podcasts, whatever you want to call it, really. But I've been wanting to do a little bit more streaming on this channel for quite a while, and I figured no better way to really kind of keep the train rolling on putting on content than to talk about Dillian Whyte knocking out Alexander Povetkin in the 4th round. Really more of a stoppage, but Alexander Povetkin was pretty much done by that point. So to quickly recap on what happened from the very beginning of the fight, Alexander Povetkin looked weird. He looked off. He did not have his balance. Like it looked like he was drinking a little bit of vodka, or at least his legs were before the fight. And he was wobbly all around the ring. Couldn't find a good footing. Almost at any point in the fight, he was fighting through it, and Dillian Whyte just battered Povetkin with the jab, landing the overhand rights just all night long. And really, it was a short 12 minutes of boxing where Dillian Whyte was just dominating this fight. It was mostly one-sided. It was fun. It was pretty good. But when you're talking about how competitive this fight seemed on paper and how great the first fight was, you would have thought that maybe Povetkin had at least enough to do something to Dillian Whyte, and Dillian Whyte looked pretty good. He looked fresh. He looked rejuvenated from, coming out of that knockout loss to Povetkin last year at Eddie Hearn's backyard, and it does certainly feel like a fresher, not necessarily new look version of Dillian Whyte, but it certainly looked a lot better than he has in the last couple of fights that he had prior to this one tonight in Gibraltar. I mean, you talk about the Povetkin, the first one, Whyte dropped Povetkin twice then in the 3rd round, and then Dillian Whyte just kind of got sloppy, had a bit of a mental lapse, left his head open for that Alexander Povetkin left hand that knocked him out. And even before that, he was in a fight against Mariusz Wach, and even though it was sort of last minute for Dillian Whyte to take that fight, he looked so out of shape. He looked really bad. And then you take into consideration the wars that he's had over the years. Derek Chisora, Joseph Parker, Oscar Ribas, all of them either hurt Dillian Whyte at some point or they dropped him. Not to mention, all the fights that he's had in the past, even before those aforementioned names. Anthony Joshua hurt him pretty bad a few years back. So Dillian Whyte may have been the younger fighter, but he was certainly no spring chicken. He had a lot of mileage under those tires, and Dillian Whyte looked fresh. He looked great. He ended things with a great series of punches that began with a right hand that just sent Povetkin to the ropes. Really, he probably would have been dropped or sent to the canvas had he not been held up by those ropes. So really could have been called a technical knockdown, but he was hurt. He was out of it, and Dillian Whyte just constantly put a lot of pressure on Alexander Povetkin, give him no chance to breathe. He dropped him, late in the 4th round, and even though he got back up, he was completely out of it. The referee was stopping him, and even if the referee, which he should have stopped it, but at that point, it was a good stoppage, Alexander Povetkin's corner was throwing in the towel, so it was going to get stopped either way. It was either going to be from Povetkin's corner, it was either going to be from the referee, or Dillian Whyte was going to knock him out. He was going to knock him out at some point, and it was almost evident from the very beginning. He did not look good. Povetkin just looked very uncharacteristic. I don't know if it's age that finally caught up to him, which is weird considering 7 months ago he looked great recovering from those 2 knockdowns, but he is in his 40s, and when you're at a fighter at that point, when you've been through the wars that Povetkin has also been, you gotta wonder at what point does age catch up to him, and it may look like it finally has. Not to mention, and not to say that Povetkin is completely done. He's still a dangerous heavyweight. He's still a dangerous fighter. Let's not forget he was fighting Michael Hunter, who is still a quality heavyweight, and they fought to a draw. And I thought it was a good fight, a good effort from Alexander Povetkin in that fight against Michael Hunter. So I don't know. Maybe age caught up to him. Maybe it just wasn't his night. It was weird. It was just, I don't know how else to describe it other than a weird night for Povetkin, but it does bring a little bit more clarity into the heavyweight title picture as far as who are the current contenders. There could always be a trilogy fight, and even Dillian Whyte said after the fight, if there was enough money thrown to him, he would take a trilogy fight. And I think a lot of us would like to see that. I think if Dillian Whyte doesn't get any big fights, i.e. a world title fight, then Dillian Whyte versus Alexander Povetkin 3 is pretty darn good. You can't really, do any worse than, you really can't do that much better than a trilogy fight between the 2 of them. There's going to be some punches. There's going to be knockouts. We've already had 4 instances where a fighter between those 2 went down in less than 10 rounds. So that kind of gives you an indication that these guys are gonna go for the fences, swing for the fences right from the get-go. And one thing that I was really impressed with Dillian Whyte was his commitment to the jab. He was way more committed to it this time around compared to how he was in the first fight. His right hand was looking great. He was dominating. He was the aggressor. His footwork was solid. He was making sure that he created opportunities for himself while also limiting Alexander Povetkin. And even though Povetkin didn't look great, his movement was really erratic. Part of that was due to Dillian Whyte's steady pressure of jabs and the overhand right. There were a couple of really big right hands thrown and connected by Dillian Whyte. There was one in the 3rd round, late in the 3rd round, where Dillian Whyte just threw this beautifully timed counter right hand that landed just square on Alexander Povetkin's nose, and it was a darn good punch where it almost kind of signified the start of the end, because even though that was late in the 3rd round, it almost never felt like Povetkin truly recovered from it, because moments later, the start of the 4th round, Dillian Whyte hurts Alexander Povetkin again with the right hand. So those are just 2 things that Povetkin had no answer for: the jab and the right hand. And really, for Dillian Whyte, it doesn't need to be any more complex than that. He just needs to jab. He has a good jab. His right hand's solid. He's still one of the most dangerous contenders in the heavyweight division. He's right back up there to the list of contenders who could potentially challenge for a world title if Tyson Fury versus Anthony Joshua does not get made. And even though we've already heard for weeks now, Anthony Joshua, Tyson Fury, they've agreed to terms. They're fighting. It's a done deal. They're 2 fights. It's not a done deal. It's not. There's still a lot of things to really, it's actually not that many things that they need to finalize. It's just what little is left to finalize is a really big thing to finalize, and that's the site where the fight is going to take place. And the problem here is that for a fight as massive as this one, you need to get the money to be able to make this fight happen. And we're talking like $100 million site fee to secure Anthony Joshua versus Tyson Fury. So don't go and celebrate Fury Joshua being made just yet. There's still plenty of work to be done, and I will say this, it's not a guarantee that it's going to happen, but don't be surprised if it does end up happening. There's a lot of talks. There's a lot of internal talks between all sides, potential investors, potential venues. I know not Saudi Arabia, well, really the Middle East in general has been linked to being a potential frontrunner to making that fight happen. The Middle East has a lot of money to throw around for those kinds of big sporting events, and believe me, they will try to secure this fight. Anthony Joshua's already fought in Saudi Arabia. Tyson Fury is managed by MTK Global, which has a good working relationship in the Middle East in general. And MTK Global has been working, diligently in regards to Fury versus Joshua. They are also a player in getting this to be done. So now, let's assume for a moment here, Anthony Joshua versus Tyson Fury doesn't get made. If it doesn't, and I hope it does get made, it should be made, but if it doesn't get made, which is a scenario that we have to envision, that we have to realize is a possibility, what is next for both guys? For Anthony Joshua, it should be Alexander Usyk, who's been waiting for a shot at Joshua as he is the WBO mandatory challenger. And there really is no other name that should, be ahead of Alexander Usyk as far as Joshua. For Tyson Fury, there is always the threat, well, not the threat, but the possibility and really the likelihood of a third fight against Deontay Wilder if Fury doesn't get to fight Anthony Joshua. Let's remember, there's still the whole mediation process, and there's still all the behind-the-scenes talk that isn't really getting reported that often nowadays between Wilder and Fury, because Fury and Joshua is what's being dominated as far as what are the potential Tyson Fury fight plans. So, let's assume Tyson Fury fights next. Doesn't fight Joshua next. It's Deontay Wilder that's gonna be the front runner and will likely fight Deontay Wilder. But if for whatever reason Deontay Wilder doesn't fight Tyson Fury and Anthony Joshua doesn't fight Tyson Fury next, there's no reason to think that Dillian Whyte shouldn't get a shot at Tyson Fury. He's back as the mandatory challenger position. We all heard the stories where Dillian Whyte has been waiting a million years, a million days, or whatever the specific number is, as the mandatory challenger to the WBC title. But let's also acknowledge the fact that Dillian Whyte had a chance to fight Anthony Joshua when he was in his first reign as champion, and that fight couldn't get made, and that fight wasn't made. And Dillian Whyte reportedly did not accept the fight, or whatever the number is. But regardless, Dillian Whyte should get a shot at Tyson Fury if, and only if, Anthony Joshua and Deontay Wilder are not next for Tyson Fury. And when you add in Deontay Wilder into the mix, then that becomes all the more unlikely for that to happen. So, now we're going to have to talk about what's next for Dillian Whyte. Dillian Whyte said after the fight, he'd like to get a little bit of a soft touch because he's been in some wars, and he's right. He's been in war, 2 straight fights against Alexander Povetkin, 2 fights against Derek Chisora, a war against Oscar Ribas, a war against Joseph Parker. He fought Anthony Joshua several years ago. Dillian Whyte's career is filled with tough fights left and right. So I wouldn't blame Dillian Whyte if he gets a little bit of a softer opponent if he doesn't get a big fight next, because he wants to keep himself, he understands he got to keep himself fresh for when that potential world title fight comes around. And from the looks of it, Eddie Hearn wants to get Dillian Whyte on a fight card this summer. I think that'd be a pretty good time frame. Doesn't leave Dillian Whyte on the couch for too long. It's a matter of what kind of card Dillian Whyte would fight in, where it would take place. Eddie Hearn even said, hey, if an opportunity comes for Dillian Whyte to fight in the United States on a Matchroom USA card, it's a possibility. The summer plans for Dillian Whyte, and really for Matchroom in general, are not set in stone because you're still dealing with all the problems and all the constant, changes regarding COVID. I mean, look at the UK. The UK had fans in the stands for boxing shows in December, and then in January they shut the sport down. They said no more boxing, no boxing for January. COVID's gotten pretty bad for a little bit, and now we're back to sort of that pre-December part where now you're doing shows. But now we're slowly trying to bring fans back in it. We're slowly getting into it. But it's still very unpredictable at this point. You can't make big fights this summer and assume there's going to be fans. We don't know what's going to be next. We don't know how the UK government is going to handle the COVID. Maybe they'll allow fans back in. Maybe they could do that. Or maybe they could hold off on bringing fans and spectators to sporting events for a few more months. So it's hard to really determine how things are going to progress. In the US, it's a little bit more stable as far as what the plans are and spectators being allowed for public events and sporting events. Texas, they're essentially reopening they're basically open fully. Florida has been kind of open for a while. California is slowly getting back open. Las Vegas and Nevada specifically, Las Vegas specifically, my mistake. Las Vegas has been very slowly but gradually working its way back into allowing fans to events. There's already internal plans with a couple of promotional entities of securing fights and getting a percentage of fans in the arena in whatever venue or arena or stadium they'll go to, whether that number be 25% max capacity, 30, 50%. It wouldn't go past 50%, at least for these initial few months. New York, I know Top Rank is targeting this summer, June specifically, for maybe potentially doing a show in New York. I know New York has been a market that's been heavily coveted by a few boxing entities, Top Rank especially, with trying to make sure that they can do a boxing show, because New York's still a very hot market in boxing. I mean, look back to a few years when PBC was going to Brooklyn almost on a monthly basis. They had like 7 or 8 fight cards at the Barclays Center alone. Not to mention, it was around that time in 2017 where there were still, semi-regular big boxing shows at Madison Square Garden between HBO and Top Rank and ESPN. So there were quite a number of different places in New York where boxing cards was taking place, especially, and also when you add in New Jersey, Newark was holding the World Boxing Super Series there. The Prudential Center in Newark is a place where they've held a couple of boxing shows there. So if you're talking putting Dillian Whyte in the United States, there's maybe a little bit more of a stable situation in certain states. And Eddie Hearn's been working almost exclusively in Florida, in Texas. I know he had the one card in Tulsa, Oklahoma, but that was more of an outlier. It's been mainly Texas because they've been able to get fans in. Eddie Hearn was saying after the fight between Whyte and Povetkin that you'll expect 70,000 fans at AT&T Stadium when Canelo fights Billy Joe Saunders in May. I don't know if it's actually going to get to 70,000. Ticket sales have been good, but as far as getting the fans in, I don't know yet if it's going to reach 70,000, but we'll see. That's not Dillian Whyte, I don't know what's next. Because I think the heavyweight division, especially at the top, is in a holding pattern. I think they're waiting until we see what the fate of Anthony Joshua versus Tyson Fury is. Once that gets settled, if it's a fight, if it's no fight, regardless of what happens, I think that's when we're going to get a clearer picture. Unfortunately for Dillian Whyte, he's going to have to be the odd man out, because if Joshua Fury doesn't happen next, in all likelihood, or at least in my perfect world, Joshua would be fighting Alexander Usyk, and Tyson Fury will be fighting Deontay Wilder a third time. And if Deontay Wilder, Tyson Fury 3 doesn't happen next, then it should be Dillian Whyte. But those are a lot of coincidences and a lot of circumstances that need to work in Dillian Whyte's way. And let's be honest, the last couple of years have been anything but working in Dillian Whyte's favor. We've been waiting for so long to get the WBC heavyweight title fight, never got it. He fought Alexander Povetkin in Eddie Hearn's backyard. He got knocked out. Now, he's back to where he was in 2019, 2018. So now we're talking 2-3 years of essentially no career progression for Dillian Whyte. That's not good. That's not good. He's been taking on big fights and hard fights left and right. So, I don't know how much longer Dillian Whyte is going to have to wait. There's a possibility he doesn't get the title shot this year. And they're going to have to wait until 2022 to get that fight. So, if I'm Dillian Whyte's team, I'd be campaigning hard for Mauricio Suleiman to enforce a Tyson Fury Dillian Whyte fight for the WBC heavyweight title. If not, then you may probably gotta be doing some soft touches for Dillian Whyte to keep him active but not hurt or not, reeling from hard fights. Like I mentioned, Oscar Ribas, Joseph Parker, Toro, Alexander Povetkin, all difficult fights that really, kind of took a little bit out of Dillian Whyte. I mean, you look at the last few years, there's almost been kind of a sense of gradual, very, very minute, but very gradual decline in Dillian Whyte. He certainly recaptured a lot of the momentum he got, he said a couple of years ago with this performance against Alexander Povetkin, and he dominated this fight. He looked great in this fight. Would I favor him against Tyson Fury or Anthony Joshua? No. Deontay Wilder? It's tough. I need to see Deontay Wilder, after he lost to Tyson Fury. I need to see Deontay Wilder and how he looks in his first fight back before I can make that prediction. Deontay Wilder's a wild card. I don't know. We just don't know how he's going to look. Mentally, physically, I don't know. Does he, completely change? Does he attempt to change his style? Which, at this point of his career, I think that would not be a great idea, because Deontay Wilder, not a great technical boxer, but he's got that tremendous right hand. That power is still world class. He could change any fight in an instant. He could win any fight with that right hand. Almost beat Tyson Fury in the first fight. He certainly can definitely beat Anthony Joshua with power alone. If we see the Deontay Wilder of old, I don't know. I think I might actually favor Deontay Wilder. Only slightly. But this is not... but Dillian Whyte, there's a lot of big fights out there, but I am actually doubtful that he gets any of them this year. So, that's kind of a bit of a shame, really, because that's a fight that, I would love to see Dillian Whyte with some of these big names. I really, really would. And just be done with the whole Dillian Whyte been waiting for however months he's had to get his shot as the WBC heavyweight champ, as the heavyweight mandatory challenger. And we'll see. It was a good... Even then, I did not expect this card to be as good as it did. This was a really good boxing show. We had, technically the co-main event was Fabio Wardley against Eric Molina. And Fabio Wardley, this good heavyweight prospect from the UK, the English champion, and Eric Molina, once a former Deontay Wilder opponent, former title challenger. He's way past the prime. At this point, he's basically a journeyman. He's a stepping stone for young heavyweight prospects. And Eric Molina did good. Eric Molina gave Fabio Wardley some trouble. he actually hurt him very briefly in the 5th round, and then Fabio Wardley just ends him with like a flurry of shots that ended with a I believe it was a left hook that was the kind of the punch that just sent Eric Molina to the canvas, and then Fabio Wardley in that period where he was just throwing punches, landed a right hand that kind of looked like it almost like it was behind the head, but it was like kind of like in the temple. It was a little bit weird. Not 100% sure of where the of where exactly the punch was. I don't think it was an illegal punch, but regardless, Eric Molina did not get back up. I don't think he responded to the 10 count, or was it the referee that stopped it? I don't quite remember, but regardless, Fabio Wardley continued his run, his perfect run at heavyweight. I think he is, I believe, 11-0 with 10 knockout victories. Not bad. He's a good heavyweight prospect, but I still think he's a bit of a development project. There's a lot of good things to like about Fabio Wardley, but I think he still needs a few fights kind of at that Eric Molina level to be able to get a proper gauge on what his ceiling is as a heavyweight. Heavyweight division is really stacked right now. It's stacked, and there's a lot of really good prospects out there, and Fabio Wardley is kind of in the middle of the pack, not even at the top of the prospects list, in my opinion. So it's going to be a long road for Fabio Wardley. I think they're going to have him get a couple of more fights, maybe eventually challenge for a British title, work his way up to maybe a European title fight. Certainly not against Joe Joyce. He's certainly not. I mean, Joe Joyce is a world title contender in my eyes. So he's certainly not going to try to make Fabio Wardley against Joe Joyce anytime soon. So at the British level, I think you could contend. I think it depends how the title situation looks there, but I think it'll be a good development process for Fabio Wardley in what should have been what I think is the real co-main event of the night. Ted Cheeseman, JJ Metcalf. My God, that was brilliant. That was one of the best fights of the year. It was phenomenal. I thought heading into this fight, I was really intrigued by this one. And I even said it on the Fight Game Media Pound for Pound podcast on the Fight Game Media Network on Patreon. I said this to my co-host. This will be the best, not will be, but I said, I have a feeling that this will be the best fight of the night, because this is a really good fight. Ted Cheeseman always gives us good fights. JJ Metcalf, this really good unbeaten at the top, unbeaten heading into tonight. Junior middleweight prospect for the vacant British junior middleweight title. I gotta tell you guys, this fight was great. This fight was awesome. One of the best of the year. Certainly, it's going to end up on Fight of the Year list, in my opinion. Not going to win it, because it's certainly not going to be Chocolatita versus Estrada 2, but I still highly recommend you guys check this out. If there's one fight from this card you check out, it's Ted Cheeseman versus JJ Metcalf. Cheeseman hurts Metcalf in the 4th round. He hurts him bad. Like, it's a miracle, almost a miracle, that JJ Metcalf did not get stopped, or he didn't go down. Ted Cheeseman just hurts him with so many big shots upstairs. Cheeseman didn't capitalize, didn't get the stoppage. I think he should have maybe worked the body just a little bit more. But credit to JJ Metcalf, he fought his way out of trouble in that 4th round. And almost going against conventional wisdom, because he did not clinch. He didn't try to clinch. He tried to punch his way out. And he recovered, because he got hurt. There was like 60, 70, 80 seconds left on the clock in the 4th round when he got hurt. So this was darn good. This was really a brave effort from Metcalf. Metcalf even hurt Cheeseman in the 7th round. Late in the 7th round, and Cheeseman looked wobbly. He looked hurt, but he was still able to fight through it. And actually in the 11th round, Metcalf actually hurt Cheeseman again. And Metcalf didn't pressure, didn't capitalize on the opportunity, and he kind of let the fight flow, kind of let Cheeseman recover just a little bit, And Cheeseman responded with now, I was gonna curse, I was gonna swear, but I was gonna say, a sensational, absolutely amazing left hook, uppercut. I couldn't quite see it properly on the replay, but it was a left hand that just dropped and completely knocks out JJ Metcalf like it was a buster beat. He hit him the moment he punched, the moment Cheeseman's left hand connected on Metcalf's face, on his chin. Boom, the bell sounds. It was a walk-off, buster beater, whatever you want to call it, last second Hail Mary, left hand that knocked out JJ Metcalf, and Cheeseman is the new British junior middleweight champion. By the way, bit of a plug, I did talk to Ted Cheeseman last year, right before he fought Sam Eggington. When his fight was first announced, I talked to Ted Cheeseman. He was at the time winless in like almost 2 years. Didn't win his last 3 fights, had been through a lot of wars in his career. He's only 25 years old, and he gave us one of the best fights of the year. Right now, in my opinion, unless I'm mistaken, this is the best fight in the UK of 2021 so far. I don't think there's a fight that's better than this one. There was so much drama. Fists were flying. Both these guys were throwing haymakers almost from the start. And Cheeseman just put an exclamation point to what has almost been kind of a career revival for him. He was lost in the British junior middleweight pack, during his winless streak. He got so much momentum. His career took off almost again when he beat Sam Eggington. And by the way, that was also another really good fight. That was a great fight. So that's another one I recommend you guys check out. Ted Cheeseman versus Sam Eggington. And Cheeseman is now in the mix for some really good domestic fights at 154 pounds. Who's to say that, you put Ted Cheeseman up there in a rematch against Scott Fitzgerald? That was a close fight a couple of years ago. Cheeseman, I know that's a fight that Cheeseman probably would love to have fight again. You look at the domestic scene at 154 pounds. I mean, obviously at the top, it's probably Anthony Fowler and Liam Smith. Liam Smith's got a fight coming up. Anthony Fowler is actually just fought last week against Jorge Fortea. Looked good. He looked good. Anthony Fowler looked damn good against Jorge Fortea. So certainly, I think there's a lot of good fight that you can make. Anthony Fowler versus Ted Cheeseman. Why not? That's a great fight in my opinion. I think that'd be a really, really good fight for the British junior middleweight title. And I don't think this necessarily puts Cheeseman as a world title contender. I don't think it puts him as a top 10 guy worldwide, because 154 is ridiculously stacked. It's loaded at the top. We're talking Jermell Charlo. We're talking Brian Castano. We're talking Jared Hurd. We're talking Julian Williams, Tony Harrison. Talking Brandon Adams. We're talking Tim Tszyu. Just Charles Conwell coming up, Sebastian Fundora, the Tower Inferno, great prospect, almost practically a contender almost at this point. Erickson Lubin, there's a lot of good names out there at 154 pounds right now. And Cheeseman, as much as it pains me to say it, Cheeseman needs more of these types of fights and more of these types of opponents to get back into the mix for a potential world title. Eddie Hearn might put Cheeseman up there to try and fight for the European title. And then after that, maybe think about potentially international big fights. Maybe try to petition and look and try to find and work his way up to fighting for a world title. The problem here is that 154 is completely dominated by PBC. Completely dominated. Jermell Charlo has the WBA, WBC, and IBF titles. Brian Castano has the WBO title. So Ted Cheeseman's not getting a world title shot so long as both of those guys have the 4 belts. And I would not be surprised if if PBC is worked towards building a Jermell Charlo and Brian Castano fight down the road. I hope it's next. It doesn't look like it's happening next, but I hope it happens down the road with all 4 belts on the line. So Cheeseman needs more of these types of fights. Like I said, I would put Ted Cheeseman either in a rematch against Scott Fitzgerald, or I would put him in against Liamson would be a good fight, but I don't think that's happening anytime soon. Anthony Fowler. I think those are a couple of fights that are really good at the domestic level for Ted Cheeseman while he continues to assert himself into the British 154-pound title mix, and that's good. We talking about at the global level 154, it's good. Domestically, and I'm talking domestically in the UK, 154 is another really good division. I mentioned those 4 names that are really, really good. I mean, Sam Eggington. Who's to say Sam Eggington doesn't get a couple of wins under his belt at 154 and puts himself right back in the mix? Sam Eggington at one point was a good fighter, a good up-and-coming contender at 147, went to 154, gave us a really good fight against Sam Eggington, against Ted Cheeseman, I should say. So, I don't know. I think there's a lot that you can work with Ted Cheeseman, but don't think it's gonna lead to a world title fight anytime soon. Maybe not even a European title. I think European title is where maybe they should try and work Ted Cheeseman into within the next year or so. And then I got the last notable fight. Not last notable fight. Like, don't want to devalue the other undercard fights, but the one that caught a lot of people's attention was the pro debut of Campbell Hatton, Ricky Hatton's son, against Jesus Ruiz. And I will say this. First of all, brief recap. Campbell Hatton won 40-36 on Victor Laughlin's scorecard, the referee scorecard, because that's how it is done in the UK, against Jesus Ruiz. Jesus Ruiz has not won a fight as a pro. He is now 0-11. So, okay, there's a lot to dissect with Campbell Hatton. Let's start with the pros. Campbell Hatton's a very good, speedy fighter. His hands are fast. There's a lot in, and I think that is something that you can build upon. I think that is something that you can work with. His left hand is very good. He likes working to the body, and I think that's something prospects don't do enough. So I think that's already something to kind of build upon. But those few good things, and again, you can work with that. He is a long-term development project. He doesn't have that much of a amateur career, and we're talking 2021, 2022, maybe 2023. You just put Campbell Hatton out of TV or very deep into these TV undercards that Matchroom has. He's not ready for big fights. He's not going to get hot-shotted into big domestic fights in a dozen fights. He's not. You look at Campbell Hatton, his footwork is still a little inconsistent. He needs to tighten up his defense just a little bit. He needs to learn how to pace himself. He was kind of gassing towards the end of the fight. It was a 4-rounder. You can't be gassing you can't be tired and exhausted after only 4 rounds if you're going to be a top fighter. His conditioning you need to work on the conditioning a little bit. Pacing, gonna have to work a little bit on that. I will give him a little bit of a break because this is his pro debut. You can tell from the way he was fighting, you can tell he was nervous. He was anxious. He wanted to give off a good first impression. And I get that. And I don't think that this is everything that Campbell Hatton has to offer. I think there might be a couple of tools in his tool bag that he hasn't shown us yet. All he's shown us is he's got a fast left hand and he likes working to the body. That's it. He doesn't have tremendous power since he couldn't knock out a guy who literally was 0-10 in his pro career heading into the fight. But there's some good stuff that you can build upon. I think that there is, I don't know there's a world champion in there. It is impossible to tell. You don't know what you got with Campbell Hatton. But those few positive qualities that Campbell Hatton has as a fighter, those are things that are worth investing, especially when we were talking about the son of Ricky Hatton. Those are things that even Eddie Hearn understands. He's nowhere near ready for big fights or even decent opponents. You're going to have to give him Jesus Ruiz types of opponents for the remainder of the year, maybe even next year. It's going to take him 15 fights at least in order to really give us a sense, at the bare minimum, like 10, 12 fights before we really see what we got with a somewhat more polished and seasoned Campbell Hatton. I think there is some good in Campbell Hatton, and I like some of the stuff he was doing, but the pacing, the conditioning, the loading up too much on the left hand to the body, almost to the point that he was forcing something to happen with that one punch alone. There is a lot that you have to work on, but they're not things that are unfixable. Conditioning, you can do that. You can work on that, and you can improve on that a lot with road work. And I think with a guy like Ricky Hatton and Matthew Hatton and his team, I think that you can do something. I think there are things that are I think there are things to work on, a lot of things to work on, but there's certainly not stuff that are impossible to fix. So we'll see. It's going to take a long time before we see what Campbell Hatton has to offer, but I like what I've seen so far to the point where I can be like, okay, there is something worth in there, but it's that if there's a diamond in that rough is deep. Really, really, really deep. And it's also hard to, it's also hard kind of, living up to Ricky Hatton's name. Ricky Hatton was one of the most popular British world champions in history. And it wasn't the greatest British world champion in history, but he was damn popular. And to be in your father's shadow, especially when he is, a part of your team, as well as Matthew Hatton, there's a lot of pressure on Campbell Hatton. If I'm Eddie Hearn, I wouldn't feature him in a lot of big TV spots. I wouldn't do that for another couple of years. I would keep him off TV if it's possible. I know that that's kind of hard to do with like the entertainment and media aspect of everything, but for the sake of his development, you have to keep Campbell Hatton off TV. You don't need to add any extra pressure while he's still learning the game of boxing, while he's still learning about some of the stuff that he needs to learn in order to be an experienced pro. And putting him out on TV is not going to do him any favors. It's not. More than anything, it's going to expose some of the weaknesses and flaws in Campbell Hatton's game, and there's a few of them. But again, there are things you can work on, there are things you can improve upon, and we'll see. I don't think that this is the end. I don't think this was the best version of Campbell Hatton. I think there were nerves. I think he was nervous. I think he was anxious because it was a pro debut on a big TV spot in Gibraltar. So I am willing to give Campbell Hatton a break. If there's a chance to see Campbell Hatton's fights for the remainder of the year, I think we'll have a better sense of what he can and can't do. But don't rush him. Do not rush him. He needs a lot of fights. He needs years of seasoning before you start throwing him into the fire. He's very raw. He's a very, very long-term development project. But there's something. I don't know what, but there is something you can build upon, and I don't know where that's going to lead. But I think it is interesting to sort of follow what Campbell Hatton does in the near future. And I think it's kind of gonna quick recap of the last fights. Just a couple of fights left on this undercard. Michael McKinson beats Chris Congo to become the new WBO Global Welterweight Champion. Unanimous decision, 97-93, 96-94, 95-94. Good fight. It was a decent fight. Michael McKinson was a clear winner. He he was outboxing Chris Kongo. Especially late in the fight, it did kind of feel like this was a fight that Chris Kongo kind of let slip away. Kongo was an unbeaten welterweight with a lot of question marks, but it certainly is a very good victory for Michael McKinson, who needs something to separate himself from the pack. He's still a prospect, in my opinion. He's been busy. He's been busy since the pandemic. This was his second fight, if I remember correctly, and his second win in the last 5 months. So keeping him busy will be good. He's only 26. There's no need to try and hotshot him into big fights right now. Only 26 years old. 27, 28, 29. He's still physically fresh, and he's not someone who is, he is not someone who gets punished severely or damaged too hard in some of these types of fights. So it's a good win for Michael McKinson, but I would not necessarily say that Michael McKinson is, ready for world title fights or world class opponents yet. Not yet. In my opinion, he's still a prospect close to maybe turning into a contender, but he's not even the top British welterweight right now. To me, that's Conor Benn. And, you got technically Kell Brook in the mix, although I don't know what's up with him. Is he going to stay at 147? Is he going to go back to 154? I don't know, but that's kind of give you a sense that Michael McKinson still needs more domestic level fights in order to progress his career. Then you got also on the undercard, Nick Webb, former Dave Allen opponent. I remember when Dave Allen knocked Nick Webb out and everyone thought Nick Webb was winning this fight, and Webb was a former British heavyweight title contender. He stops Eric Pfeiffer, hands Pfeiffer his first loss as a pro, which is a good momentum swinger for Nick Webb. He needed this type of positive momentum in his career. He's now won his last 4 fights. If I'm looking at the numbers correctly, 2 of those wins have been by inside the distance. He certainly has bounced back decently well after the loss to Dave Allen and after the loss to Kamil Sokolowski, like a few months later, and that was one of the biggest upsets in recent British heavyweight boxing memory in the last few years. So he's done well. I don't see a top level British heavyweight than Nick Webb, even with this win and this win streak. I just don't see it. I could be wrong. I could be wrong, and Nick Webb could go on this great run. But I just don't see it. And I've seen enough Nick Webb to know whether or not he's gonna be Tyson Fury, Anthony Joshua, Dillian Whyte. I don't see that in Nick Webb. I don't see that kind of fighter and that kind of success for Nick Webb. And lastly, Yusuf Komari against Kane Baker. Komari continues his win streak, starts a win streak, I should say. He stops Kane Baker in the 5th round. Komari is now 12-0-1. Good win for Komari. Still a prospect at this point. Not much to glean from. So that kind of opened the fight. He's also another fighter in his mid-20s, so he's still a prospect at this point. Doesn't have I'm not seeing world championship material out of him, but he'll be someone who I could see be a contender for, at the domestic level for quite a long time. Wouldn't be surprised if he gets put in a situation where he'll fight for a British or an English or coming for whatever title. I'm not entirely familiar with the current situation right now as far as super featherweight at the UK level quite yet. I have to check that right now and see where Komari could stand, but I think it's overall, final thoughts on the card. This was a really good fight. This was a really good card. Dillian Whyte gave us a great performance to end the night. Ted Cheeseman gave us one of the best fights of 2021 up to this point. Campbell Hatton, boy, you need to work on this guy. You're going to have to work on this guy for a few years before we see how good he really can be. And Michael McKinson, good win for him. Fabio Wardley, solid heavyweight prospect. Still not elite prospect, but a win over Eric Molina the way he did it. It's a good positive step for him in his career. And overall, if I were to grade this show, probably give it a B+, A-. I will say this. This card kind of felt like it was 1 or 2 fights too long. It kind of felt like that. Like, once we've got the Cheeseman knockout win, we were all ready for Dillian Whyte, Alexander Povetkin. It was like, this was a phenomenal appetizer heading into the main event. And then we have to wait 5 more rounds because Fabio Wardley and Eric Molina needed to have their fight. So, I thought, pacing-wise, I thought this card could have done a little bit better. But I thought this was a good fight card. I will give it a B+, maybe A-. Actually, no, I'll stick with B+. I will stick to B+, which is a really good grade, in my opinion. I think that's a really solid grade. There was a great fight. There was a phenomenal knockout. You got to see Campbell Hatton in his pro debut. You got to see a couple of good British prospects get some nice wins. Not much you can ask for out of a card like that in Gibraltar. So, I liked it. I think this is something to build upon. I love it when Eddie Hearn does these shows in these like weird locations, whether it be Tulsa, Oklahoma, whether he does it in his own goddamn backyard, whether he goes to Gibraltar, or when he, prior to the pandemic, when he was doing shows in Monaco, almost yearly. So I like those different types of environments. It was nice hearing a UK crowd back on a show like this. So overall, this was a good Saturday of boxing. Shame we don't have a major fight card this evening, but I will settle for this. It's a good Saturday to kind of just unwind and relax for a little bit before we really get into a loaded April, a loaded May. It's been a good year of boxing in my opinion so far. We haven't had all the big stars fight yet, but with what we got some good fights coming up, and we had some really good fights in these 3 months of 2021. So we're kind of getting back into a sense of normalcy, and I am excited for what's next. So I think we're gonna wrap things up here, and as I mentioned at the start, but I'm gonna plug things up again. You can check out the YouTube channel, Carlos Toro Media. We got some great interviews. Just recently spoke with Michelle Rivera, a top PBC lightweight prospect. I posted the entire Jaron Ennis, Sergey Lipinets press conference from yesterday. I got to speak to Jaron Ennis, to Sergey Lipinets, to Stephen Espinosa. Other interviews from this month alone. We're talking to Eric Morales, Roman Chocolatito Gonzalez, Marisela Cornejo, Regis Prograis, Sandro Sayas, Robert Easter Jr., you name it. We got a lot of names that I've interviewed on this YouTube channel, and I promise you we're going to get more content out there as the year rolls on. So look forward to that. Subscribe to the channel, hit the bell icon for notifications on when more videos come out. You can follow me on Twitter at Carlos Toro Media for more boxing news, reactions, breaking news, and all that kind of stuff. And until then, I hope you guys have a beautiful weekend. Hope you guys stay safe and enjoy the boxing that we got coming up in the next couple of months, because it